Welcome to the Mediacasters with your business besties, Karina Belizzi and Julie Lokun. In every episode, you'll get behind-the-scenes access to experts who share their struggles and successes in podcasting, publishing, and presenting. So grab a pen, grab your bestie, and kick it with Karina and Jules.
Check, baby, 1, 2, 3.
check, baby, 1, 2, 3. What song is that, by the way, Karina?
Honestly, I don't remember. It must be some relic from my youth, right?
80s. We're 80s babies.
Yeah. That's for sure. Well, we do get to meet an incredible man in the world of publishing today, right? That's Eric Reid. So
we had kind of a crush, a little bit of a crush, I think, on Eric.
Well,
very
as you
accuse
me of this all the time. You say I fall in love with all of our guests, and it might be a little bit true, at least for a moment in time. I think it's just one of the actions of getting to know somebody a little bit differently, and there's something about that newness that I think just new in our lives, new to us, right?
Yeah.
And new to our audience, quite possibly. So let's just, without further ado, bring the lovely, the amazing Eric Reid up into the stream and get to know
Skinny
him.
Brown, the Skinny Brown dog media mogul, right here with us. I want to talk in Spanish,
you guys.
too.
I feel so special. And the 80s, let's just say I was driving a car legally in the 80s.
Illegally or legally?
Legally.
Oh.
So he definitely wore his sunglasses at night.
Yeah. I remember many a night at the Disco Kid pretending I was John Travolta.
Oh, wow.
Roller skating rinks and everything else that came with that period.
Oh, you can. Look at those.
And not with that figure 8 thing like like the beginners do. I mean, I was doing the official crisscross.
Oh, wow. Well, you would have run laps around me on that rink. I was just trying not to run into things, right? So never got to be too adept in the rink.
Well, Eric, this is really going to be a prolific interview, starting with skating, talking about skating in the 80s. But I imagine you curated your creative side in the 80s.
I don't know. I think, I guess that's why I love books, is because everybody has a story. And not all of us have the roller skating experience or, whatever our ill-gotten youth was spent doing, but we get to experience it through other people's stories. And so it's like you live a million lifetimes if you just read a million books, or at least 100 lifetimes if you read it.
Wow.
So I want to get into the history of it. What actually brought you into the world of publishing? And what is it that you've kind of carved out as your specialty?
What brought me in was bad books. I had been doing business coaching and working with coaches for a long time. And one of my clients sent me a book and said, I've published my book. And I was like, okay, first, I'm kind of offended that as your coach, I didn't know this was something you were working on. And now that I've read your book, I'm really sorry that we weren't working on this together. And so I called him and I said, well, actually, I spent probably about 2 weeks walking and talking to myself. I spent a lot of time in that space. I was
and roller skating.
And roller skating. Yeah. And I said, he didn't hire me to criticize his book. He didn't hire me as a publisher. He didn't hire me in that space. God, I really shouldn't speak about it. It's not my role. It's not my role. But he did hire me to help elevate his business, and this is going to crash and burn his business beyond repair. And he is a friend. And so I made a call and I said, I got to talk to you. And when this is over, if you need to cancel our friendship, our coaching agreement, I understand. But how many copies of that book do you have? He gave me a number like 250. I said, you need to burn them all and then send apology letters to anybody that you've given them to. It was like, what do you mean? I said, this is so off your brand, so off your message. And besides that, page 64 and page 87 have the exact same paragraph on it. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, have you read it? And he said, well, I wrote it. And I said, no, have you read it? He said, not yet. I said, maybe you need to pull off to the side of the road and read it. And he called me back. He's like, oh my God, this book's a disaster. and I hired a publisher. I thought that's what they were supposed to fix. And I'm like, let me explain the process. And what he had done is he had hired a publisher, and he thought that publishers were editors and publishers would review things like that. I'm like, no, a publisher is a distribution warehouse for your book. They take what you give them and they figure out a way of distributing it to the universe. Unless you had an editing agreement, that wasn't part of their responsibility. And so he proceeded to have a bonfire, and we worked on his book and redid it. And then I got another one and another one. Pretty soon I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on out there? And I investigated and I found out that there are vanity presses that I think primarily prey on coaches. Like, you can become a 10-figure speaker, just get your book published. And so the only thing those vanity presses worry about is getting that book published. And I finally said, okay, I'm going to help who I can help and hopefully save a few. And that's really what led into Skinny Ground Dog Media.
Wow. Well, Eric, that is commendable work. And I have to say, having been through the process once, writing a book with Julie.
So much fun, right?
And going through the editing, I found in our first edition prints a repeated paragraph.
Yeah. When you said that, I was like, woo, we did that too.
And it was one of those things that happened in formatting. So unfortunately, even though it wasn't in the earlier edit, I mean, we were rushing to get it out in time for Podfest. And so we will be producing another edit. And this is one of the marvels of self-publishing via Kindle. Like, we can actually change it in KDP and get it updated. We hadn't released the Kindle version yet, so I shouldn't have, made people think it was available on Kindle. But the Audiocaster's book that's out there has a repeated paragraph.
My copy.
And thank you so much for your review, by the way, because reviews are important. We appreciate your support in our vision for our brand. I want to kind of circle back to the scams in publishing, because I hear about this all the time. It drives me bananas, meaning there are people promising, oh, I'll get you to #1 on Amazon. There's so many tricks. I can get you to #1 on Amazon. It's just, it's a scam, #1. #2, the longevity of it might last 24 hours. And I don't think a lot of people know about it.
So I have a sister company in Latin America, House, and we have an author, very well known, very respected celebrity individual, that wrote a book about the experience of being in television, being on stage and film. And they called and they were like, why isn't my book #1? Why isn't my book #1? And the team called me and was like, this guy's kind of like freaking out. I'm like, okay, give me 24 hours. 24 hours later, he was #1. 24 hours later, he was #2. Then 3, then 4. But we got that screenshot of the #1 position in that category, and it was a relevant category. I'm going to specify that it was a relevant category. Was it important that he have that #1 ranking? Yes, no, maybe, who knows? It was important to him. But it is sometimes important if you step on a stage and say, you know what, I was a #1 best-selling Amazon author in the category of podcasting, or in leadership, or in women's empowerment. And I held that position for a month. Then what that says is you are an authority recognized by that group of individuals, and now you're speaking on stage to that same group of individuals, so you have credibility. I always tell my authors, #1 on Amazon doesn't mean anything if you don't convert that position into something bigger, into another platform, into another client, into another opportunity, because Amazon is just a sales site. Now, if you're #1 and you have 64 reviews in the first week and all of them are 5 stars and they're raving about you, those reviews have more value than the #1 position, because you can say, this is what people say about me as a thought leader, as a coach, as a women's empowerment person. So everything has a place, but know its place beyond, like chasing a trophy. I recently went to my parents' house, and my mom had this box of stuff, and in it were like all of these trophies from when I was a kid. And I looked at them, and I thought, it's kind of cute, but like, why did you hang on to them? Like, I don't want to put them on a plane and haul them back with me. I hauled back a couple just to show my son and like have some fun with, but I'd rather chase impact than trophy.
Hmm. That's powerful. Well, that's what moms do, by the way. Keep needless memorabilia around.
I have stacks of it. My son keeps looking at it. I'm like, don't worry, you'll get this crap later. I mean, stuff later in life.
When I die, it's all yours.
That's it.
So, Julie, one of the things I know we have been itching to talk about is really the primary differences between something like self-publishing and traditional publishing, and also that vanity press. I know we talked for a moment about vanity press as well, but these really are three different worlds within the arm of publishing. Just like within the world of podcasting, there are different ways to approach that. So I would just really love to hear from Eric's perspective what he thinks the benefit is of doing something like having a direct publishing business where you're working through the Amazon platform, or going traditional, or even just offering your book wide, which means, also uploading that so that it's available on Nook and other platforms as well. So Eric,
and vanity, being wary of vanity, because a lot of people get suckered into vanity presses as well, like your friend.
Just like that trophy chasing, right?
It's a topic that could be a 3-day seminar, but in short, traditional publishers, there's five, maybe six real traditional publishers out. And we think of them as Penguin and Random and Harper's. Understand that they have a business model, much like a venture capitalist. They have a collection of artists or writers that they look at and they say, well, if we invest in this, and this, and we'll take 5, we're expecting 3 of them to probably not do so well, 1 of them to break even, but the 5th one is going to pay for all of the investments that we made across the board. And that's the way venture capitalists invest in anything from software to startups. They're like, we might lose, but this might be the golden trigger. So let's go after a group instead of after an individual to strike gold. When they put you in that math, using those 5 examples, they're hoping to recover their investment, but they're not committed to making you a number 1 success. They're hoping that somewhere across the board, they're going to strike gold. So often I'll hear somebody say, but if I get a traditional publisher, I'll get on the New York Times bestsellers list. I'll be a blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what makes you think that? Well, isn't that the way it works? No. Understand the business model. They're collecting a group of writers that they think have a good chance of at least breaking even on that advance, if not succeeding. And the thing about the advance is, if they advance you $10,000, hear the word, that is an advance against royalties. And if royalties come in at $8,000 and they advanced you $10,000, guess who has to come up with the extra $2,000? You, Mr. Writer/author. And you can do that by writing them a check. You can do that by going on book tours that you have to fund and keep paying for until the royalties hit that $10,000. And after that, everybody starts to be happy. So understand the business model of a traditional publisher before you think it's the utopia and the golden ticket. Books like 50 Shades of Grey, published.
Oh, we love 50 Shades of Grey. Don't we?
Yeah, but it was a self-published on Amazon that got such media exposure and so many reviews that a traditional...
Was it self-published?
It was.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Wow. And so then a traditional publisher came and said, we're going to buy up the rights to this because we think that not only is it a great book, but it could make a great movie. And by being the ownership of the title and the ownership of the content, then we have the right to sell it for movie rights. And so self-publishing can be just as successful. So what is self-publishing? It can be the total 100% DIY, do it yourself, or what we do is called assisted self-publishing. We take you, the writer, and guide you through not only the writing process, through the publishing process, but the big answer is at the other end, you retain royalties and intellectual property, and you retain your book. So if somebody is a coach and there comes up with 6 ways to learn to podcast better, they get to go out and teach that and collect revenue off those 6 ways and create a workshop and another book and another book. They sell it to a traditional publisher. They can't talk about 6 ways ever again without the publisher's permission. And so for coaches and thought leaders and content creators, self-publishing is the best. And then Vanity Publishing, pretty obvious when they say, you write us a check for $3.99 and we'll have your book on Amazon next week. You'll be a #1 bestseller and don't 50 copies. And you never get an editing report. You never get feedback. You do all the work. They just get you up online. And then in the middle of those two are anthologies, which is kind of becoming the new how to become #1. So collect, and I saw one recently that had 100 authors submit a writing, which was maybe 1,000 words. And they were in an anthology collection of authors. So everybody had a page and a half. It was so poorly done that they actually had their second page was their picture, their website, and their sales offer. But when 100 people buy the book on the first day because they want to see themselves, it can go to #1. So then they're walking away saying, I'm a #1 bestseller. Anybody that's going to invest $10,000, $20,000 in you as a speaker, as a coach, or a consultant is going to see through the smoke and mirrors and be like, you're not real, and this is crap. We're not buying into it. So save your money. Don't invest in things that are going to make you look bad on the back end. Invest in those things that are going to elevate you.
When you said Vanity Presses charge you something like $3.99, I've heard much higher numbers than that, like ridiculously higher
20
numbers,
grand.
like $15,000, $20,000 to bring your project to fruition, and really not understanding what the entirety of that includes. If they are promising you things like being a #1 bestseller. I mean, they're not promising you New York Times bestseller, that's for certain. So I just love your perspective on that.
I had an author recently, she's on her second book, she's doing it with us. Her publisher, air quotes, and understand that a publisher is really a distribution channel, charged her, I'm trying to remember, there was a production fee, which included editing, cover design, formatting, blah, 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 that she had to pay up front. She had an agreement that she had to purchase 200 books directly from the publisher. And then the publisher got a percentage of the sales royalty up to a certain point. And the sad part was she had to buy the books from the publisher at cost, $14.95, $16.95, whatever it was. So the publisher made money on the difference between print costs and sale costs. And at the end of the day, the publisher had only sold 158 books over a 2-year period outside of the ones that the author had bought. And it cost her $10,000, $15,000.
Wow.
And so I was like, what did you gain? I got to be on the publisher's website. I'm like, and that did you how much good? Because she only sold 158.
Yeah, there's this feeling, though, even I hear this amongst others, oh, well, are you traditionally published or are you self-published? And it's almost like, oh, you're just self-published. Like that, there's still that kind of air that I've heard from people. So I wonder, where does this scream? Where does this ego really come from? I mean, it's obviously driven by ego at that particular point. You're saying, well, I have somehow crossed a threshold. I am more of a valued asset. I'm a real author. You're not. That kind of attitude coming with it. And I mean, I know it starts somewhere. I think it's just with the ego, but I wonder if you think that that's credible too.
I think it comes from not only ego, but a lack of understanding. or knowledge, because I know fiction writers who have never been traditionally published, who are making a 4 and 5 figure monthly income off their fiction series that they've done self-publishing or assisted publishing over and over again. I know a coach that worked with us that produced a journal that has acquired like $100,000 in new clients as a result of it. So if somebody would say, well, you're just self-published, I'm like, yeah, and I made 6 figures last year. Like, what is it you want out of this book? And if you want a trophy, then seek a trophy publisher. But if you want to grow your business, make an impact, create something beyond it, work with a publisher who understands that the book is part of a larger platform and you're utilizing the book as the lowest entry point to the next position of engagement with you, whether that's coaching, workshop, webinar, whatever.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. Speaking to going wide, like I wanted to talk about that because I hadn't heard that terminology until very recently. I follow Cassie Alexander. She happens to be one of my friends. She's a published fiction writer. And on a recent TikTok, she said, I'm taking my books wide. And she started to talk about what that meant without necessarily going to traditional publishing, because she started there and is now kind of going back to just doing the self-publishing thing. So what does it take to go wide? Is that something that you also help with?
So wide means that you provided on multiple distribution channels, both print and digital. Mm-hmm. What that channel looks like or what that space looks like depends partly on not only your genre, but also who you're working with. If people go directly to Amazon and say, I'm published on Amazon, understand that Amazon is a business that's goal is to make money. Their goal, like whether it's off tennis shoes, diapers, or books, you are just a vehicle for them to make additional revenue. And so they're not going to allow in air quotes, to make additional revenue outside of them, because then why would they want to work with you? If you're selling at Walmart and Amazon, why would they be embedded or make it available for you to be with the competition? So often authors think because they're on Amazon, everybody on the planet can see it. We go wide, meaning we use Amazon, Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, Kobo. I mean, the list is endless.
Do you do that through Ingram, or do you do that? How do you do that?
It depends on the book and the author's primary location. So it might be through Ingram Spark, which is probably the most recognized, but there are a couple other avenues to go wide depending on the book and the space. For instance, our authors in Australia love Ingram Spark because most people there buy their books through Book Hub. I think it's called Book Hub or Booktopia. They don't buy it through Amazon. Well, if they were only on Amazon, they would lose those potential sales. We are Latin Americans, somewhat like Amazon, but the problem is Amazon's search capability for non-English books is different than it is for English books. And so you have to understand the marketing behind, like keyword searches in Spanish aren't the same keyword searches in English. So everything has to match what we call the outcome desired by the author. What is your outcome? Where do you want it to be? And that's why we have so many authors right now changing between saying, my book is really popular in Spanish, but I want to have it on an English platform just to create a larger base. Anybody that reads a book in Spanish is not going to type in Amazon English search terms. They're going to type Spanish search terms. But if they're an English author, they need the book to look like it was originally set for them. And so there's a lot. It's like playing chess. You need to know what the end goal is.
And that's why we put so much emphasis on, at least for authors, knowing what you're doing, get educated before you decide to start peddling your book, because the authors put so much love and labor into their books. It's done and they don't know what to do. They don't know how to market it. They don't know the tools they need I'm curious to know what would be your best advice in terms of bottom line sales for books. Best, one word or one sentence. First thing that comes to mind.
Landing page.
Okay.
With a lot of our authors, one of the bonuses or things that we provide if they ask is a landing page to direct pre-sales and early sales to. Though that may take away from their book ranking on Amazon, if somebody buys a $14.95 book and then books an appointment for coaching that could turn into $1,000 a month coaching client, you just got paid for collecting an email address and growing your business versus the $3.23 you might get from Amazon for selling the book there. So would you rather give up the chance of having one more sale in Amazon in exchange for creating a client base? Or we have an author right now, her book is a fiction. She wants to pitch to a traditional publisher. Tried to talk her out of it, but she still wants to do it. So we created a short story that's going to go through her landing page only so that she can show a traditional publisher of my 10,000 Facebook friends, I had 1,000 of them buy my short story. Now the traditional publisher says, okay, you know how to market, you know how to get response, and you have an engaged audience that's 10%. Those are metrics that we can work with and grow. So yes, we'll consider you.
Because as an author, you are your brand, whether you are self-published, hybrid published, or traditionally published. The work doesn't end.
They don't care that you have 100,000 friends on Facebook or on Instagram. They want to show that you have historically been in comments and engagement on Instagram and all of that still is playing weak. They want to know that you have the ability to move your audience to the voting booth. And for them, the voting booth is buying a book, downloading a free copy, signing up for the book launch party, something that shows that you can make them leave one platform and engage in another, because that's ultimately what they're going to need you to do when they finish publishing your book, because they don't handle the marketing. They only handle the distribution. They might do a little bit of marketing.
They might help you on that book tour, right? Like getting set up with certain spots.
And that's the other thing. A lot of authors think, well, I got a book tour, or my publisher is going to set me up in a book tour. Basically, it's kind of like back in the old days, if you were a band, your manager might say, you can be playing at Bob's Basement next Thursday in Idaho, figure out how to get there. When your publisher says, I'm putting you on a book tour, and here's the 20 stores that we've placed you in because they have pull, they have clout, they have a reserved spot, they're saying if you can get there, you can claim that spot. But you figure out how to get there, meaning you buy your plane ticket, you drive the car, you load the books, or maybe they'll load the books for you and have them dropped. But you've got to do the tour. They'll just find you the seat at the table, which can be an advantage, but understand that the 2 or 3 or whatever time period before you show up, you're calling that bookstore and saying, have you announced it? Where is it posted? What is the local radio station, TV station, news station that I can talk to let them know I'm coming?
Yeah. Well, I've been to quite a few book signings in my time, but the ones that I've tended to get to are the big names, right? And when that big name comes in, the bookstore is clamoring for it and they're making an event of it. And they're, renting out a hall, collaborating with a local church or doing whatever it takes. But that's not everybody. Those are the A-listers. And so if you think that you're going to get the A-lister treatment when you are an unknown in the very beginning, and that's your expectation, that's what you think you're going to get with a traditional publisher, that's not the truth, right? That's what we're getting to.
And even the A-listers are showing up there because, one, they've got to pay off that advance or that royalty against, or advance against royalty. So they're like, great, if I can get a really good showing in Chicago, maybe then I can skip Podunk, Iowa. Like the closer I get to paying off that royalty and getting an advance on the second book, the better off I am. And 2, they probably have a bigger platform that they know that they've got to get out there and make the handshaking so that people show up at the radio station, the TV show, the Broadway show that they're performing in next.
This is good stuff, Eric Reid. I know we need to have you on the Mediacasters again because I think Karina and I want to pick your brain. So many topics, but I think to understand if you know how to do it right, if you're not expecting, if your expectations are within a reality, then write that book, publish it, do it your way, reach out to Eric Reid. All this information will be in the show notes. But I mean, you understand the mind of the author and you are an advocate and steward for authors, which I know Karina and I were immediately drawn to.
Yes. And I'd like to know if there's a particular book that you've, let's say, recently published.
What's your favorite book
that you're proud of? That you want to? Yeah. What's your favorite? I know you can't have a favorite.
It's like the one that I'm like right in the middle of is the one that I'm absolutely loving, or the one that I've just seen a review on that finished the vision of what I knew the book could do for somebody's life. It's like, yes, that's my favorite book because it impacted that life. Or I saw this speaker being able to hold a room based on what they did. And so, like, when I say they're all my favorite books, they're all my favorite books. They're not always my favorite authors.
We won't go into that.
So we have a similarity. It's, something I started this podcast today talking about. I fall in love with all of our guests, right? They're my favorite right then.
And then we'll forget about you in a week.
Right now. I'm like, I just need more.
Crushing on.
I hear you. There are certain authors that when I look at their book, I guess it's like women that have had children. As soon as they get home from the hospital, like, let's do it again. But if you talk to them during the labor and delivery, they're like, never, honey.
Eric, you're speaking my language now.
See? Now, there are some authors that I'm like, oh, we're done. Thank you, Jesus. And then there's other authors that they're like, why are we going slow? And I'm like, I don't want to leave your story yet. I'm not ready to release you to the world. But as soon as it's released to the world and I see the impact it's making, it's a weird feeling. I sometimes feel like a grandpa with the book because I've seen the author grow during the process. We spend a lot of time. Or they spend a lot of time with me. Let me say that because I do a lot of the early developmental and the pulling of the idea together and getting it down solid. And so they may be crying, they may be cursing at me in the middle of it. We may be arguing over a point. I really work, I'm not afraid to offend them and say, this is a bad set, or this is a bad idea, or you need to do this. Because I know once it gets past that point and it becomes a published book and they hear somebody say, when you wrote this in your book, it changed my life. I'm like, that's the moment I'm working towards. I'm working not to seeing you being an Amazon bestseller, big whoop-de-doo. I'm working towards reading a review that said, if you only have money for one book in your life, this is the one to spend it on. Then I'm like, wow. Because the idea that a book, and I always say this, that it's typically within 2 feet of your heart because of the way you're holding it, you're reading it. And it's normally in an intimate setting because you find your favorite chair, your favorite cup of tea, you get your cozy blanket and you settle in with a book. That's a really intimate space to share with someone in the form of a book. But as an author, if your book is done right, you show up in that space almost as if you're physically standing in the room with them. And so to be able to move them during that intimate time together to a better self, a higher self, a new awareness, that's huge. And then knowing that when they step out of that space, they're making generational impacts, if it's regarding family matter, or they're saving marriages, or they're becoming healthier, stronger individuals. Man, that's a legacy that will far outweigh any trophy that my parents pack away in a box and wait for me to come pick up.
Well, Eric, I want you to create my reading nook now because you've just painted a picture of one that I want to live in.
I have my reading chair. I encourage authors, it's like slow the process down. If you're counting on your book to either create or save your business, then you're coming at it from the wrong direction. If you can't say, I'm willing to commit 6 months of working in silence, chugging away, doing what my coach says to make this the best book possible, I don't want to work with you. And I don't mean that from a vanity position, but that's what it's really going to take. Now, 3 or 4 of those months might be intensive writing, and 2 of those might be manicuring and marketing. But if your editor, publisher, whoever you hire says we'll be done in 30 days, then that means the impact you're going to make is probably not going to last beyond 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what I'm invested in life.
Wow. Well, I love that.
We're kind of speechless. We love Eric Reid, and in a very profound way, just because we understand that you are doing this with integrity, and everything that you shared with us is with pure honesty and serving others. And I believe that's what life is all about.
Well, and I think you guys do the same within your podcast. It's like we could book a million guests, but do we want to tell those stories just to fill airspace? I mean, when you think about it, when you think about it, a podcast lasts forever in the scientific sense that those airwaves are continuing to vibrate forever and ever across universes. That I think you guys recognize that. And it's like, we only want to put good stuff out there, or at least stuff that if 3 generations from now our kids tune in on whatever devices they tune into, they gain value. And I guess maybe because I'm gray haired and I'm old, it's like, I want to make sure that when I'm gone, I leave something not with my name attached, but something that, when society collapses, it's the one thing they put in a vault to say this could help us rebuild civilization if we ever need to.
Wow.
You said when. He said when.
Well, it's going to. I mean, it's just scientific.
Wow. I mean, that's prolific. I mean, just ending on this note, quite honestly, it's about understanding your legacy and not doing it the quick fix way, but doing it with purpose. You are leaving your legacy. You are what, Karina? Kicking it?
He's kicking it. I want to specifically invite you back so that we can talk about launching your book tour. Like, just dig into that one subject. Like, what does it take to launch a book tour and be successful in it? Or,
it's funny because today I actually sat down and I work so much with authors and writers. And when I say my day is very busy, like, I am blessed beyond what I can even imagine. That I have clients that are saying, I'll wait until December if we can start that.
Wow.
I can, because they know the intensity of the work that I'm doing, that they're willing to wait for their chance to be in that incubator. And I was like, okay, I need to do like just a 5-day book launch challenge or something, because it needs to be taught, but I can't get around to doing it. So now you just challenged me.
Okay. Well, we'll keep challenging you, and perhaps you can keep challenging us, and we'll just all grow together.
Yeah.
Well, and I will tell every author the best way to launch your book is through podcasts. And I say this.
We love that.
Not as a plug or not as but the more you talk about your book and the more people ask you, and then the bigger thing, not just appearing on podcasts, but listening to yourself on podcasts, you'll discover things that you didn't know you said that sound better than what you thought you could ever say. And those are the things that you want to start writing down and keeping track of, because that becomes your keynote. That becomes your platform. That becomes your pitch. Because as you're going through, all of a sudden you'll say something and you'll go like, dang, that was good. I need to remember that. Well, yes, you need to remember that. And so I always tell our authors, get on podcasts, but before you do, ask permission of the host or whoever to say, can I get a copy of it after it's been packaged? Even if it's before release, I agree to sign a non-disclosure, non-exposure, whatever you need, so I can hear it and get better at what I do.
That's what Karina and I do, Eric. You're speaking our language now.
Yeah. 99% of quality podcasters will say, yeah, I'll be happy to give it. Just don't release it or market it before we get a chance to, because we have, a platform that we do it through.
Yep, exactly. But Eric, we ask all of our guests to say 2 words before they leave.
First, I want him to put on his roller skates before he says it. Strap on your roller skates. Let's do this.
Do the glide.
Do the glide. Do the glide.
So we ask you to say the 2 words, and they are kick it.
Kick it.
Wait, not with a question mark.
Truthfully, though, if you're sitting there and you're asking yourself, what is holding me back? Just kick it.
Oh, I like that.
Kick it.
Just do it. Yeah. Okay, kick it.
You should get t-shirts. Kick it.
We have them. Don't you worry. We have all the swag.
Jules would not have let us go to Podfest without them. Let's kick it, like right across the chest,
Yes.
Thanks for listening to another episode of The Media Casters. You can keep this conversation going and kick it with Karina and Jules in live office hours each week. Visit themediacasters.mn.co to sign up. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe whenever you listen. Let's kick it.